Passing chords are one or more chords that connect two chords in quick succession. Usually, passing chords aren't emphasised and won't affect the structure of the song. In this video, we'll start off with simple passing chords and then introduce more advanced chords as we go along. These theories can also be applied to actual chord progressions. Let's start with using inversions. Many forms of passing chords will involve using inverted chords. We can change the ordering of a chord's notes, and this is what we mean by inverting a chord. For example, where we have the chord C major that we make out of 3 notes, we call this a triad. We take the first, third and fifth notes of the scale, which is C, E and G, and we can move the C to the top. This is called the first inversion. Then we move the E to the top, and this is called the second inversion. Changing the inversion will change the sound of the chord. If the chord had 4 notes, there would be 4 different inversions. We can use inverted chords as passing chords. So let's say I have the chord progression that goes from C major to F major. We could inject a first inversion, E, G and C. The first inversion is written as C over E. There are many other ways to annotate this, which will show the interval from the root note, but for me, this is easier. This is a diatonic passing chord progression, so called because we are only using the notes that are in the current key, C major in this example. Now here is where we can get creative. We can add bass notes to extend these chords further, or change the inversion sound. So let's add some E notes in the bass. The C now becomes an inverted chord, C over E. We could make the passing chord an inverted C7 chord by adding a B flat. This is the 7th note in the parallel minor scale. C major 7 would have the 7th note in the major scale. We could also invert the F chord. Let's play it all together. As the passing chord contains a B flat, which is not a note in the C major scale, we call this a chromatic passing chord, as it contains notes outside the key. We are also changing the quality of the passing chord. It's no longer a major. We can change the chord's tone or quality in a passing chord. Let's try using an augmented chord, for example. An augmented triad would involve sharpening the chord's 5th. Let's take the F major and add the augmented chord as the passing chord. If we sharpen the top note again, it becomes an inverted D minor, so let's use that as our target chord. Let's say we have the chord progression that goes from F to C. I could invert the C chords to make it easier to transition to. If I wanted to add a passing chord, I could flatten the 3rd of the F chord to make F minor. The notes then slide down to the target chord. I could even flatten the 5th to make an F diminished. This could be added just to create some more movement. Now, as before, let's add some more interest by extending these chords to create some nice rich tones. Let's use the F major and make it a major 9th, for example. We're adding a major 7th, which is E, and then a 9th, which is G. Now let's do the same for the minor chord, except we add the minor 7th, which is E flat. Let's make the diminished chord a 7th by adding a D. Then let's add the F on the top to make it a 5-note chord. Then let's go to the inverted C chord, but I'll add a 2nd. This makes a nice rich sound. Let's take a look at half diminished chords and full diminished chords. The diminished scale is a symmetric scale formed by the sequence tone, semitone, tone, semitone, and so on. The C minor scale is as follows. As mentioned earlier, when we refer to a C7, we are saying it's a C chord triad with a minor 7th added, B flat, as opposed to a C major 7, which would be B. So a half diminished is a 4-note chord which is half minor and half diminished. The 1st and 3rd are shared, the 5th is diminished, and the 7th is minor. A fully diminished is where the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 7th all come from the diminished scale. So going at a slight tangent, you may ask, is there a full or half augmented chord? The augmented scale is also a symmetric scale. It has 3 semitones followed by 1 semitone and so on, but there are only 6 notes. So adding the 7th would always come from a different scale. Let's use the full and half diminished chords as passing chords between C and E. I've made C an inverted major 7, and have made the E minor a minor 7th. Here is the half diminished, which is also written as C minor 7 with a flattened 5. You can see we're using notes that are chromatic neighbours to the first chord, although not all the notes need to be a chromatic neighbour. Then I'm going to add a C diminished 7, a full diminished where the B flat slides down to an A. We can create progressions that don't use chromatic neighbours, yet they still share tones. Let's take chromatic mediants. They have a belong together but also dissonant feeling and can be used to create interesting passing chords. Mediant chords are major or minor third, that's 3 or 4 semitones from the root chord, up or down, and share one note. They also share the same sound quality. For example, C major to E flat major is a minor third away from C and shares a G. It shares the same quality, which is a major chord. The E major chord shares an E, the A flat shares a C, and the A shares an E. C minor also has chromatic mediants: E flat minor, E minor, A flat minor, and A minor. Let's see how using chromatic mediant chords as passing chords can add interest to a chord progression. Let's say we have a typical chord progression C, G, and F major. Let's add an E flat as a passing chord between C and G. E flat is a chromatic mediant of both C and G. For the passing chord between G and F, we could add an A flat. It's a chromatic neighbour of G, but it's also a chromatic mediant of F. When we put this together, it transforms the progression and creates a really unique sound. Another approach is to use primary and secondary dominant chords. To summarise, a dominant chord is the 5th chord in a scale. A dominant 7th is a major triad with a minor 7th added. It will want to resolve to the root chord of the scale. It would also want to resolve to the parallel minor of the root chord. Secondary dominants are dominant 7th chords that resolve into the rest of the scale. For example, in the key of C major, E7 to A minor, or D7 to G. I've made a video about secondary dominants, which I'll provide a link in the description if you wish to go into this in more detail. Because these chords want to naturally resolve to their root chords, they can be used as passing chords. Let's use the chord progression C, F, and A minor. We can inject the dominant 7th chords as passing chords. Now for the creative bit. By mixing this up, we can create a dramatic progression. Let's make the first chord an inverted second. Okay, then on the C7, let's add, say, the 11th notes. Okay, let's make the F major a 9th and the E7th a 9th. These include the 7th and the 9th note. And then finally, let's resolve into the inverted A minor. Okay, this feels like it wants to keep going. We also make use of dominant chords in 2-5-1 passing. This technique is often used in jazz. Say we want to travel to a major chord, we can use a major 2-5-1 progression. Let's say we're navigating to C major, so we pick the 2nd of that chord, which is D minor. We're going to use the 5th, but as a dominant chord, as it resolves nicely into the C. This chord is G7. The D minor and the G7 work nicely together as they share tonal qualities. So let's add some layers and see how the major 2-5-1 progression work as passing chords. Here we're going from A minor to C. Jazzy. Now let's look at a minor 2-5-1 progression, where we travel to a minor chord. If we are in A minor, for example, we can pick the second chord of A minor, which is B diminished. And then we pick the fifth, which is E minor, but we want the dominant E7 as we're resolving to the A minor, the first. Let's add some layers as we've done previously. I'm going to make the C a major 7 and add half a diminished seventh to the B chord. And then I'm going to invert the E7 chords so the bass A flat goes to the A. And then I'm going to add the 9th and the 11th notes to the tonic chord. We've taken a look at the dominant 7th chords. Let's look at substituting these with tritones. A tritone chord is called the devil's interval. It is a whole 3 tones from the root note of a triad. The tritone for C is F sharp. We can actually replace a secondary dominant with its relevant tritone. Why? Well, the 7th and 3rd are the most important notes tonally. These are shared in the dominant 7th and its equivalent tritone 7th. Both the C7 and the F sharp 7 want to resolve to the F major or F minor. F sharp is also a chromatic neighbour of F, and that's why it works so well. Here we're going from G to F, and rather using the dominant 7th of F, we're going to substitute it using the tritone of C7, which is F sharp 7. We can now start to add some concepts together, change some chord shapes to make it more interesting. Right, let's make the G a G major 7 over B. We're going to use the tritone of C7, F sharp 7, and invert it to create a rich sound. Rather than just resolve it to F, let's hold the tension and go to a C9, the 7th with the C9 added. Then add a C7 for a laugh. Then on the final chord, let's invert the F so that the A is in the bass, and then we'll add a second, G. You can see combining concepts creates a really rich sound. It's been good fun playing around with these progressions. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are many passing chord possibilities that I may not have covered. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, please like and subscribe and hope to see you soon.